So, welcome everyone today to the Brain Blast newsletter holiday edition. Today, we're going to be diving into the world of alcohol and its role in our society, from building trust to building whole civilizations. Maybe after this interview, people might feel a little bit less guilty for sharing a glass of wine with family and friends this holiday season. And Dr. Slingerland, if I may introduce you here. So Dr.
Yep.
Edward Slingerland is a distinguished university scholar and a professor of philosophy at the University of British Columbia. He has appointments in the departments of psychology and Asian studies. He's also a fellow of the Royal Society of Canada and director of the Database of Religious History. His interdisciplinary approach combines cognitive neuroscience, evolutionary psychology, archaeology, anthropology, and ancient history to understand human behavior and culture. Dr. Slingerland wrote a book called Drunk: How We Slipped, Danced, and Stumbled Our Way to Civilization, which challenges the conventional view that alcohol consumption is an evolutionary mistake. Instead, he presents the thesis that this intoxication has been a crucial adaptive tool that has helped solve distinctly human challenges and enabled the rise of large-scale civilizations. So I want to thank you, Dr. Slingerland, for taking the time to chat with me today. We should be in for a really interesting conversation.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So, Dr. Slingerland, I want to say that I've been super excited to talk to you today. As I said, it'll be a little bit of a change up from our usual interviews, kind of focused on circuits and the nitty gritty of the neuroscience.
Right.
And I also feel like this interview will challenge a lot of opinions, because in neuroscience, as students, we hear so much about how terrible alcohol is for your brain, but
Yeah.
it's super rare that we ever hear about the kind of more adaptive effects. And on that note, Dr. Slingerland, so you've made a bold claim that might sound outrageous at first, that kind of human civilization might in part owe its existence to beer and alcohol. Can you kind of take us through how you went from being an expert in ancient Chinese philosophy to arguing that getting drunk might actually be good for us?
Yeah. My colleagues were a bit baffled by the alcohol book, but it's actually directly related to my earlier work in a couple ways. So the first way is my early work was focused on the power of spontaneity, and that's coming out of early Chinese philosophy, this ideal of effortless action. Um, so the early Chinese philosophers thought that you were most effective when you could stop trying too hard and relax into this state where you lose a sense of yourself as an agent, you're unself-conscious, and you're acting in this very kind of system one way, right? Or cognition way. But they all face this tension of how do you try not to try. So that's the title of my first general audience book about this, what I call the paradox of effortless action, or paradox of spontaneity. If I tell you you're going to be a more effective podcast host if you just relax, you're not going to relax. You're gonna start thinking, oh man, do I sound awkward? And or you're going on a date and I say just be yourself, and you're like, well, how do I do that, right? It's a real. So what I argue and try not to try is that this is a real tension. It's a genuine paradox that falls out of the structure of the human mind, in the sense that Dan Wegner famously said, if you say don't think of a white bear, you think I've activated. You can't not think of a white bear. I've just activated the concept in your mind. When I tell you to try to relax, the part of the brain that I'm activating is actually the part we're trying to shut down. So that's why it really is genuinely paradoxical. And I use this game at Science World in Vancouver to illustrate it. I don't know if you ever played Mind Ball, where you've got to try to relax. It's a perfect illustration of kind of how it's hard to relax, even when you know that relaxation is how you succeed. And in the course of writing that book, so the early Chinese thinkers have various kind of behavioral strategies for getting around the paradox. So do these rituals and kind of stop worrying about it. Sit like this, meditation practices, breathing practices. What I started to feel at some point in writing that trade book was maybe alcohol is actually a response to that tension. So it's paradoxical for me to tell you to use your prefrontal cortex to shut your prefrontal cortex down. But if I don't tell you that and I just hand you a beer and that ethanol goes in there and just starts turning the PFC down by itself, that gets around the paradox. And so I got interested in how alcohol, especially, but intoxicants in general, might be a cultural technology for getting around this paradox that I've always been interested in my work. Um, and then the second connection is I've been very active in the cognitive science of religion, kind of the evolution of religion. And we had a big grant at UBC about a decade ago, looking at kind of the cultural evolution of religion. And the whole basis of that project was it's weird that we're religious. Like religion is costly, and at least if we look at it from a scientific perspective, it seems completely wasteful behavior, right? Worshiping invisible beings, cutting off the foreskin of your penis, scarifying yourself, building these enormous pyramids and tombs. Um, and so you'd expect that individuals and cultures who do that kind of stuff would get outcompeted by ones that didn't. And yet that's not what we see. We see that individuals and groups that are religious are quite successful. And so that whenever you kind of put on your evolutionary spectacles and look at human behavior, and you see that it's ancient and it's ubiquitous and it's costly, then you've got to start looking for what's paying for that behavior. What are the benefits that are paying the costs? And I came to see that alcohol, intoxicants in general, but alcohol in particular, was exactly the same kind of mystery as religion. It's ubiquitous, it's ancient, it's costly. So why are we doing it? There's got to be something, some benefits. And so my colleagues and I looked at what the benefits of religion might be at both an individual and cultural level. And so drunk is partly, doing the same kind of treatment to our desire to produce and consume alcohol. Why has it been preserved in the human species?
Wow. And so would you say that like you can draw a parallel between alcohol and religion in that way, where maybe on an individual to individual basis it seems like, yeah, it's a waste of energy, it's costly resources, but maybe as a whole in society, both religion and alcohol kind of bring people together in a way that we can
Mhm.
function and kind of build these systems. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, basically. And they're often used together. Right?
Yeah,
Typically, intoxicants
absolutely.
and religion.
Yeah,
We don't, we want to be safe and just we'll
yeah,
use multiple methods to do it.
absolutely. And you mentioned briefly the prefrontal cortex. So now, since it is a neuroscience
Yeah, right.
podcast, I do want to get into that a little bit. So let's talk about the prefrontal cortex. So this is the part of your brain that's working overtime for most students right now, actually, as they're doing
Mhm.
their finals. Um, can you explain why something so essential for being a functioning adult is simultaneously working against us when we need to be creative or socially connected?
Yeah. So as you said, it's really crucially important for getting your homework done, getting to class on time, delaying gratification, all these things that make us successful adults. Um, what it There's good evidence though that it actually interferes with certain desirable things like lateral thinking. So creativity that involves connecting otherwise disparate things, anything solving an insight task. Um, the PFC gets in the way. So it seems to one of its functions seems to be, we focus on a task and we can move from A to B to C, but we don't see these other possibilities in the margins. So if what you need is an insight, if what you need is something kind of out of the box thinking, coffee. So caffeine is the friend of the PFC, right? You want to avoid that, and that's where alcohol is helpful. So it gets in the way, and this is why. So I was inspired very much by Alison Gopnik's work at UC Berkeley, and she's done all this very creative work on creativity and development, and has shown that little kids are really good at these insight tasks where you have to come up with kind of an unusual solution. And we get progressively worse at these tasks over time. And I lay kind of the performance by age of these creativity tasks over on a graph of the development of the PFC, and they kind of they match up. So as our PFC gets more mature, we become less creative. We become more rigid and less creative. And so one function of alcohol is to kind of turn back that developmental process and get us back to that kind of flexibility we had when we were 5 or 6, with the added advantage that we're actually not 5 or 6. We're adults, and we know kind of what's interesting and what a creative thing, useful thing would be. So it's a trick for recapturing creativity, and also social openness. So the PFC also kind of shuts us down to social possibilities, simultaneously loosening the hold of the PFC and boosting feel-good hormones, so serotonin, endorphins. That's the other main effect of ethanol. Makes us just more open, and it makes us like other people more, makes us like ourselves more. It lowers inhibitions. And so these are all good things. Again, in moderation, these are all good things in social situations.
Totally. And I like what you said about how it's like a little hack, because even though we have an adult brain, kind of when we're under the influence, then we can kind of we can tone down that PFC, revert back to that more childlike state of lateral thinking and making those connections. But at the same time, we still have our adult brain, and maybe if you don't go over the top on the drinking, then you still have access to all that knowledge that you have as an adult and rational thinking, and you can combine those more in a more harmonious way. And going along with that, I noticed in your talks and your book, you mentioned there's a sweet spot around like 0.08 blood alcohol content, which is actually right at the federal criminal driving limit.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
But can you tell us what's special about this particular blood alcohol level from a neuroscience perspective?
It's the sweet spot where your PFC is downregulated enough that you're capturing these benefits. Your serotonin and endorphins are boosted enough that you're feeling good without going too far, because you get to higher levels of intoxication and you start to stumble, you start thinking stupid things. They're not creative anymore, they're just stupid. It just seems to be about 0.08 seems to be that right balance between control and lack of control that allows you to be socially competent but relaxed.
Maybe it'd be good for a lot of our listeners, university students, to get a little blood alcohol monitor. When you hit 0.08, you lay
stop. Yeah.
Too many stories that we've all experienced. People going higher. Maybe it's our own self, but yeah, it's
well, it's because you also, at UBC, you're very much a northern drinking culture, so Northern European drinking culture, which is distilled liquors, doing shots, drinking to get drunk, and it's a really dangerous drinking culture, actually, and it's not conducive to the benefits that I talk about in the book.
Totally. And I was going to ask you a couple questions about that a little bit down the line, or we may as well bring it up now. So from the gist that I got of it, it seems like this kind of distilled drinking method is not really a natural way of drinking it. They're making the alcohol content way higher than we can naturally get. Can you talk a little bit about that? How kind of drinks in the past, like beer and wine, how the alcohol content of those drinks versus kind of the drinks that we have today, as you said, in kind of this more Western culture, how does that kind of change the social dynamics of drinking?
Yeah, so alcohol has historically always come with a built-in safety feature, which is that it just can't get stronger than a certain amount through natural fermentation. So, yeast convert sugars into ethanol, but at a certain ethanol concentration, they shut themselves down. They're producing this. They're basically engaged in biological warfare against bacteria, and they're tougher than bacteria are when it comes to alcohol. So that's why they're using ethanol as their weapon. But they're not immune to ethanol, and we've been breeding yeast to get stronger and stronger because we want to keep making stronger and stronger beers and wines. But so we've pushed it up to about, you can get up to like 16% ABV now with the Australian Syrah. Um, but historically, beers and wines have been relatively weak because of this limit of natural fermentation. So we've been drinking like 2-3% ABV beers and maybe slightly stronger fruit wines. If you're drinking a 2% beer, you can drink that all day long and never get beyond 0.08. It's just physically impossible to get dangerously drunk
Yeah.
at that level of concentration. Um, all bets are off once we invent distillation. And this happened very recently because I'm telling a story that starts 10 million years ago with our primate ancestors. Um, we didn't have distilled liquor on a large scale where your average person could have access to it until like the 1600s in the West and maybe slightly earlier in China. Distilled liquors just change everything because you basically throw the safety feature away, and now you can concentrate alcohol up. You can get like 90 something percent ABV distilled vodkas and tequilas. That at that level of concentration, we're just not equipped to handle that. And you can very quickly go, from zero to dangerously, like life-threateningly drunk in 15 minutes. If you're doing shots of tequila and you don't have any food in your stomach. So it's just, I think that distilled liquor should really be thought of as a different drug.
Mm.
It's so much more, even though it's still just ethanol, it's so concentrated that it's just wildly more dangerous than what we've historically had access to.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and you mix young people. You guys still don't have fully developed PFCs, right? Most of you.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
then you're adding this really powerful form of ethanol. It's bad.
Yeah.
So I've been trying. My daughter just is a freshman at McGill, and I'm
Oh
trying
man.
to I've been trying to teach her that avoid distilled liquor. It's
Yeah.
really not good for you.
Totally. Yeah. You do what you can. I guess if she's the type of person who can learn from you, that's perfect. Some people have
Yeah,
to make their own mistakes.
yeah, yeah,
But yeah, I know that's really interesting. Kind of, and you made me think that yeah, like you can have one bottle of tequila or vodka, um, or whatever it is. I mean that's enough to put a lot of people in the hospital.
yeah. No, you
Just
can kill a small village, right?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's pretty mind-boggling.
And the
Uh,
other new thing, so that's the other safety feature that has been disabled recently, is the social aspect. So historically, you never had access to alcohol except in very carefully controlled ritual public situations where there's built-in methods of kind of keeping everyone drinking at a reasonable rate, um, whether it's formal rituals or informal habits. And that all gets thrown out the door when you guys can have bottles of tequila in your dorm room and just have it whenever you want it.
yeah,
It's crazy. It's crazy and it's historically unprecedented. So
I
alcohol has become more dangerous in the modern world.
so what I'm getting out of that is sort of like in the past, alcohol would be used during celebrations or certain traditions or rituals, kind of with a larger group. You'd have wine and beer, whatnot. But nowadays, anyone can just have like you said, a bottle of rum in their dorm room, and
Yeah.
just it's easy. I guess it would the overall theme be kind of it's a lot easier to abuse nowadays.
Yeah. It's much easier to abuse. All these safety features have been removed.
Right.
Um, so yeah, it's, the benefits that I talk about in the book are these historical benefits that accrue when you're using alcohol the way we have historically used it. And the
Yeah.
modern world is different. And so One of the messages of the book is for us to see the ways in which we've disabled these safety features and to try to get them reinstalled.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah.
Go back to naturally fermented forms of alcohol,
Mhm.
adopt more Southern drinking culture, Southern European drinking culture.
Yeah.
So that's where you're drinking beers and wines.
Yeah.
You're always doing it with a meal. You're doing it in moderation, and getting to the point of being visibly drunk is actually embarrassing.
Yeah.
Um, Kids are introduced to alcohol at an early age. You have a little bit of wine, watered down wine at the table. Um, Everyone's there, parents, kids, men and women. You don't drink away from the meal tables. That just is a kind of evolved cultural package that seems to lead to healthy drinking practices and is protective against alcoholism.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. Um, I want to say something too. I think we hear so much in neuroscience. Even one drink a week is killing your brain, and it's going to lead to shorter life expectancy due to cancer and all these risks. But at the same time, we hear that one of the largest factors, if not the largest factor for life expectancy, is your social bonds.
Mhm. Yeah.
And so I think it's a little bit of a conflict there. So I wonder if you could kind of uh, tell us. You describe getting drunk together as a kind of cognitive disarmament, almost like laying your brain down on the table, like showing you're not hiding anything. Um, so, kind of from a neuroscience perspective, why does it become harder to lie when your PFC is dampened? And how does that kind of build trust with the people around you?
Yeah, it's harder to lie because if you think about lying, it's a super PFC intensive thing.
Mm,
It's cognitively, lying's complex cognitively, right? I've got to keep in mind what I'm telling you, which is not true. I also have to keep in mind what reality, I know what reality is. I have to keep those two things separate. I need to suppress any facial expressions or emotions or words don't that match reality but don't match the thing I'm telling you. It's a really, you're running your PFC at full speed when you're lying to someone.
yeah, yeah,
It's really PFC dependent, which is why kids are such terrible liars. Yeah, you know right away when they're lying because they don't
yeah,
have very powerful PFCs. Um, but as adults, we get better at it. You throw some alcohol in the mix, and you're downregulating PFC. It's cognitive disarmament. I now become less able to lie.
mm,
I'm also less prone to lie because my serotonin levels are getting boosted. I'm feeling good. I'm feeling more cooperative. Um, so that's one of the ways in which alcohol, kind of at the formal cultural level, it's why, treaty negotiations, important business negotiations happen around alcohol.
yeah,
Um, we shake hands to show that we're not carrying a weapon, and we drink together to show that we don't have fully functioning PFCs, and so you can trust me. Um, so that is, that's important. And at a more informal level, it's how you get to know people. You are trying to meet whatever, you're in a new dorm and you're trying to meet your dorm mates. You are started at a new company, and you want to meet your colleagues. You gather over alcohol because it helps relax people. It makes them more gregarious. It makes them more extroverted. It removes a lot of the barriers to socialization that would otherwise exist. So, this idea of alcohol as a social lubricant is universal and ancient, and there's very good neuroscience behind it. And it makes sense why we use it as a cultural tool. And so this is where I think the health advisories are really, they're misguided in some really basic ways. I mean, they're not seeing the benefits of things like creativity. Um, but even if you're looking, all I care about is life expectancy. I don't care if you're creative. I don't care if you're happy. I just want to maximize your lifespan. Even if that's your lens, saying that alcohol, the only safe level of alcohol consumption is 0, is almost certainly wrong. Because if the other thing that'll shorten your life expectancy is being lonely, being socially isolated. That's really dangerous for your mental / physical health. And so, the guy, I actually did an interview recently with somebody who was talking about his grandfather who lost his wife kind of at a relatively early age and was alone for a big chunk of his life. And drank what sounds like a lot. He drank 6 pints a day. This is in Scotland. But they were 2% beer. So that's actually not very much alcohol. And it was at his local, the pub at the end of his street. So he lived alone, but he wasn't alone because he would go to this pub and drink with people. And that was his kind of extended family. That's where he got social support. I had talked in the book about Robin Dunbar. He's a anthropologist he's at Oxford. Did a study of basically looking at people who had locals they went to regularly and people who didn't. And it seems like having a local to go to has all sorts of positive health, mental and physical health outcomes. So, the medical consensus seems to be that alcohol is a net physiological negative. If we're just talking about the impact of ethanol on your body-brain system, it seems negative. It's not 100% agreement on that, but even if you grant that, Drunk is written assuming that that's the case, there are all these other benefits that you have to take into account when you're deciding on, whether or not you're going to have alcohol in your life as an individual, or you're going to use it in your organization or your social world.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of the times just mentally, it's so much easier for us to have a black and white perspective. Alcohol is bad or alcohol is good.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's a lot more nuanced than that. As you said, if you're drinking distilled liquor alone, obviously it's going to
That's
shorten
almost certainly bad.
yeah, it's certainly bad. But if you're drinking kind of these lower percentage alcohols in a communal setting and building those relationships, building that trust, I think that goes a long way to extending your lifespan. I mean, if we look at a lot of these blue zones like the Mediterranean, like everyone there is drinking wine into old age, and we don't see it decreasing their lifespan. So I think it's a lot more nuanced than we like to make it in our head by the sounds of what you're telling us. And I know we're kind of going a little bit over time here, but I do want to hit a big topic here. And this will be kind of mind blowing for anyone who learned the standard kind of agricultural revolution story. Your argument is that our ancestors didn't settle down exactly to grow food, but they actually settled down to make beer or alcohol. So can you walk us through what the archaeological evidence actually shows and kind of what makes you question these thousands of years of conventional wisdom?
Yeah, so this is not my hypothesis. This is something that developed in archaeological circles in the 1950s, I think. And it's called sometimes the beer before bread hypothesis. And the argument is, again, the standard story is we developed agriculture, we made bread, and then one day someone left their sourdough starter out too long or something, and it fermented, and they tried it, they liked it. So the standards, in the same way that the standard scientific story about why we drink is a mistake story. It's an evolutionary hijack, because if a Psych 101 textbook is typically going to tell you it's just, you're triggering a reward network that evolved for other reasons. We're also told historically it was a mistake. It was something that kind of was a byproduct of agriculture, but that doesn't fit the archaeological evidence perfectly. And so what motivated this theory was sites like Göbekli Tepe in modern day Turkey, where the site's like 10, 12,000 years old. It's before there's agriculture in that part of the world. And yet hunter-gatherers were coming together and building this monumental religious architecture, these huge stelae and in what looked like elaborate temples. They were feasting. So we have the remains of gazelle bones, and we know they were having these big feasts, and they were drinking something. There were these big vats that held liquid. And we at Göbekli Tepe itself, there's not direct chemical evidence of beer, but we know it was being made in the region at that time. So they're almost certainly drinking beer and possibly hallucinogen laced beer. So these hunter gatherers are coming together from all over this region and engaging in this very costly communal behavior to build this architecture to have a party. So they're having a big feast that's fueled by alcohol. And so the argument is that the motivation then to start cultivating grains is to make more and better beer. And that maybe bread was a later accidental invention. And then this gets bolstered by the fact that if you look around the world, you see a similar pattern where the first cultivated crops tend to be selected for their psychoactive properties, not for nutrition. Maize, teosinte, the wild ancestor of maize, almost certainly wasn't used as food when it first got domesticated. It was used to make beer. It would make terrible grain, but it makes very good beer. It's called chicha. Everywhere around the world, you see this. So the argument is hunter-gatherers kind of were lured into civilization by beer. And then, and probably it led to short-term decrease in their quality of life. But it's what got, civilization kickstarted, because once you get people living in big groups and you have agricultural surplus, specialization, literacy, all these things followed that led to, us sitting in modern day cities talking on Zoom.
Wow. So people were basically lured to kind of congregate by the beer, and then eventually now we have AI.
Yeah.
It's interesting to think about. Yeah, that's pretty cool. And to respect your time here, I'm just going to ask one more quick little question.
Yeah.
You don't have to answer it if you're not comfortable, but seeing that the 0.08 alcohol kind of level increases that lateral thinking. Were you having a one or two drinks when you were writing this book?
So actually, this isn't in the book, but I wrote about 10 or 12 versions of the book proposal, and my agent kept sending it back to me and saying, I'm not sending this out. This isn't good. And she was right. Like all the arguments and all the science that's in the finished book were there. But it was boring. It was really very PFC kind of, alcohol is costly. So therefore it's an evolutionary puzzle why we drink. What are some possible hypotheses? I'm kind of walking A, B, C, D. And I realized at one point I hadn't followed my own advice in the book. I hadn't written any of it drunk. It was all written at 0 BAC. And I was like, oh, that's my problem. So I was on a work trip, and I had a couple hours before I was going to meet my colleagues for dinner. And so I went down to the hotel bar with my laptop and had a Negroni. I was like, I have to get BAC up quick. So this is an exception to my distilled liquor ban. And by the end of that Negroni, what's now basically pages 1 to 2 of the book revealed themselves to me. And it really, the phenomenological feeling behind it was that I was taking dictation. Like, it didn't feel like I was writing it. It was just like, suddenly I was like, people like to masturbate. That's the first sentence.
That's
And people love that first line. They love the first couple paragraphs of the book. And that was all produced at 0.08 or possibly slightly higher. I don't know how fast I drank that Negroni, but so it's
very fitting. You followed your own advice.
I followed my own advice, and that worked. Yeah.
Oh, that's pretty funny. Yeah. Well, I think that this whole interview has been perfect timing for our holiday edition, because we're about to enter a season of toasts, celebrations, and communal drinking. So I think humans mark kind of occasions. Virtually every culture marks occasions by drinking together. And so I think that yeah, I mean, this is really fitting interview for this holiday edition, and I want to thank you for coming on here. And maybe, yeah, as I said, people will feel a little bit less bad for raising a toast
Right.
this holiday season and having some wine with their family and friends. And I hope that today we kind of challenge some opinions on kind of the black and white of alcohol being bad for you, good for you, and kind of this nuanced perspective of historically how it brought us to the civilization we live in today, and how continually it helps us to build relationships, build that trust among our communities. But then also the dangers of distilled alcohol and having the right setting for drinking as well. I think that's super important for especially students to know.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Especially students. Yeah.
yeah. So thank you so much, Dr. Slingerland. It's been an absolute pleasure to meet you and talk with you today. And I really want to thank you for the time you spent with us. And I'm sure everyone will have a lot of insight from this conversation.
Great. Thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Kate. Well, take care and happy
All right.
holidays.
Take it easy. You too. Bye.
Bye-bye.